Welcome back to Student Hub Live. In this session, we're going to look at another current debate, and the topic of focus is lockdown and child development. I'm delighted to be joined by Professor John Oates, who is a professor in developmental psychology and has been chair of E219 Psychology of Childhood and Youth, which was ED 209 before that. Now, John's research interests include mental health in babies and young mothers. So, John, I'm really delighted. Thank you for joining us today to talk about this. It's been an issue of so many of our concerns, lockdown, and how that's going to impact on our children. You know, people worried about smartphones and how much screen time children have, and the various effects that this might have on them. So, what are the risks for children, young children, in terms of smartphones and tablets and that sort of technology?
Well, kicking off with that point, Karen, there's a lot of strong language spoken both in favour of and against the use of digital devices like tablets, computers, smartphones, and so forth by children. Actually, the evidence base is very weak, and we really don't have any strong evidence that there's a direct causal effect of children spending a lot more time on screens than perhaps parents think is warranted. One of the problems is that there are variations in how much time children choose to spend on screen, and sometimes those are associated with differences in child development outcomes. So the longer time spent on screen, sometimes the poorer performance in schools. But A, it's not a strong effect, and B, correlation doesn't imply cause. It may simply be that those children who aren't perhaps so don't have a positive attitude towards education are also those who spend more time on screen. So it's their attitude, not the time on screen, that causes the differences. So the evidence is very weak. But there are some things that we can say. Screen hygiene is important. There's lots of material out on the internet which is potentially well, misleading or even worse, damaging. So, for parents to ensure really good screen hygiene is very important. Also, a good mix of passive as well as active engagement with screens.
Brilliant. So it's important to sort of, I guess, ensure that your children are watching what you want them to be watching and that you've got the right controls in place. And as you say, that mixture of active and passive. I mean, the other thing, in addition to children spending a lot more time on screens that's come out of lockdown, is that they're at home a lot more with us. I mean, are there positives of having children at home a lot more with their family than might normally be the case?
Potentially, yes, because we know that solid attachments, what we call secure attachments, depend very much on spending time, sustained periods of time with caregiving figures. And so, spending more time with your children is absolutely the right sort of environment to build attachments that are going to really support children through their adult life and help them socially, academically, and so forth. Because again, they are associations, but we do know that securely attached children, children that have good attachments to parents and others, tend to perform much better in school, socially, and emotionally.
Mm. I mean, I like to think I'm my daughter's best friend, but I don't think that's a general consensus between the pair of us. I really worry about her missing some of her friends. And I just wanted to ask about how parents might facilitate some of those other forms of attachments, those friendships that, well, I think are really, really important for children.
Yeah, and there's often people think about the attachment to a parent, particularly the mother, as being the most important, and that tracks back to some misunderstandings of research of John Bowlby. He never said that actually. He said that actually children develop almost like a constellation of attachments, and having multiple
Mm,
attachments, Karen, just as I think you were suggesting, is a really positive thing because it
mm,
means you learn different ways of relating. You have different models of how different people behave. So that is positive. And so there is a real potential risk. And actually, this was highlighted in a Guardian article a few days ago, pointing out that teachers can become attachment figures for children, and that the loss of those, of contact with those, can be very important. Similarly, peers, as you've mentioned, attachment with peers, they're very different, actually. Attachments with peers are very different to attachments with adults. But parents can really help children maintain their social networks, first of all, by helping their children articulate what what these different peer figures mean to them. I mean, psychologists use the term significant others and trying to find which are the significant others in children's lives and then facilitating contact, which doesn't actually have to be through electronic media. Have you heard of letters? They're very interesting. I mean, just
Uh,
simply children writing letters. They love it, actually. Sending pictures if
mm.
they're young. It's a way of keeping in touch with grandparents, for example, cousins, school friends. But utilizing all the different channels that we have available is really important, and parents can facilitate that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I try and get my daughter to write some of these thank you letters, which never goes quite according to plan because I always like the idea more than she does. And that leads me to the other point is that, sometimes I think when we're stressed, if we're working at home, we've got lots of other worries. So many people have had a multitude of various stressors with this lockdown. And, I know I found it's hard sometimes to try and maintain healthy relationships when I just want to go and lock myself in the office or, I'm having a hard day myself. So, what advice can you give about maintaining some of those healthy relationships with children, particularly when things might be tough?
Yeah, well, I think they're tough for children too. Children don't
Mm,
necessarily show their distress and upset in the way as you've so clearly articulated, Karen. Um, I don't want to be sexist about it, and this isn't general, but on the whole,
mm,
boys tend to act out and girls tend to act in. I mean, there's a lot of variation, of course, so this is not it's not
yeah.
across the board. But so their behavior is probably giving you signs about how they're feeling, but not very clear signs. All you know is there's something bothering them. So talking to them, opening up conversations, showing that actually you're a bit stressed by all of this, but that you're containing it, you're managing it. That gives them confidence in you as a solid attachment figure, but also helps them to see that these feelings don't necessarily have to be really destructive and so forth. They can be handled. So that's just number one. But for both of you, um, just have fun. I wanted to mention that the 29th of June is International Mud Day.
Oh,
And
fantastic. What are you going to do to celebrate International Mud Day then, John?
well, the first thing I thought was because I'm a scientist, I thought I'd half fill a jam jar with earth and then top it up with water and shake it and let it settle and show my children online the different components of earth. But then I thought, well, if it's warm, why not go out and cover myself in mud and dance around?
That certainly seems good, and the weather's looking good for it as well. So, yeah, why not indeed? I'm sure the children would absolutely love that. So, I guess it's about playing and about, while we have screens and a lot of technology. I mean, in my day, we always used to have a lot of time making mud pies and things like that. I sometimes wish that my daughter could get into it a bit more. But yeah, sometimes it is the simple things in life, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, make mud pies with her, Karen. Go for it. 29th of June. Can I just I would like to say though that there have been studies of children's mental health in pandemics previously, and the results of those studies are quite worrying. They suggest that something like 30% of children will actually have a clinically significant mental health issue during a pandemic. So I wanted to point to a website. It's called Mind Ed, and it's part of the Healthy Child Programme. It's an NHS resource. And if parents are concerned about their children's mental health, Mind Ed, it's top of Google, is a really useful resource.
Brilliant. No, that's fantastic. There have been some amazing resources. I'm going to check that out though, because very often they've got very practical things that anybody can do. So we can spend a bit more time talking about that if you'd like to, John. Are there any particular features on that you'd recommend people do, or any activities that could be very helpful if people are maybe worried about their children?
Well, this website is really about mental health more generally in children and young
Mm,
people, so it's a really good resource. But I think it will help parents to check out how severe their children's difficulties are. And I mean, the things I've talked about are important if it's moderate or mild mental health issue. Another thing that's really useful is to just simply do things together. Drawing together can be very good. Drawing about things, crafts. Actually, family history can be quite
mm,
interesting. Often we don't have time to talk about family history. So
Mm,
that's another good way of establishing those bonds together. Um,
mm,
but it's important also to accept the children's negative feelings as well as their positive feelings, because if you don't pay attention to and respond in a helpful way to their negative feelings, that may lead
mm,
to them wanting to bottle up their feelings or express them in different ways. But I think
mm.
those are some of the ways we can really help.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there because I mean, one thing I've been very mindful of is that sometimes I don't know how to express how I'm feeling about something, and why should a 10-year-old be able to articulate in words how they feel? You know, there are other methods, and I'm very mindful of the drawing and how therapeutic that can sometimes be. I mean, we've been doing some of those mind art colouring in things, just sitting together choosing colours. But you've done other work with drawings, and I think sometimes when we're not able to articulate things with words,
Yes.
other forms of media can be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Family drawing is a recognized technique in mental health therapy. Just simply asking a child to draw the family and then discuss the drawing can be helpful. But another really good one, which can actually work for children of most ages, is if you have little doll type figures. Um, I won't mention any proprietary brands, but there are
Thank
certain
you.
brands of small doll-like figures that represent men, women, and children. Actually, to start a scenario, this is called the story stem method. So you can start a little scenario where mother and father and child and aunt and I don't know, some other figure are together. Something happens, but you simply start the story and let the child continue. And in this case, this current time, it could be a COVID related theme. And going back to the drawing, Karen, just briefly, I'm reminded of a particular child who had developed some phobias as a result of an infection. And simply talking about this didn't work, but asking her to draw her feelings was extremely revealing, and it showed the source of the problems and seemed to be very helpful for her moving forward.
Hmm. Excellent. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me today. You've given us some really wonderful practical advice. So we'll check out the website. Kieran can put the link to that in the chat. And Kieran, just before we go, how's everything with you and our audience at home?
Have responded to. Regarding the use of technology, actually, it seems our students are doing some really interesting things. For example, linking games like Minecraft to, for example, team building skills that are required. Do you know what I mean? And really good for online safety chats. There's one of our students here who uses Assassin's Creed, which is a game I quite enjoy to explain phases in Egyptian history. Yeah, so there's definitely like there, and there's also a strong awareness, as John touched on, of over engagement can also be detrimental. So yeah, it seems our students are very savvy.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kieran. Well, thank you very much, John Oates. That's been a really fascinating session. We're going to have a short video break now. We'll show you another of our campus tours. This is the tree sculpture. And then we're going to continue our conversation around early childhood by talking about early childhood qualification and career opportunities. So I'll see you very soon.